Welcome back, everybody. We're working on our full bike build today. Today we're going to be installing some of the components on the bike. First off, we're going to set up the fork, headset, and the stem. We're going to get the handlebars onto the stem and maybe install some of the components onto the handlebars, the brake levers, and the shifters. And then we're going to install derailleurs and brakes before we lace any of this stuff up. So we'll go ahead and do that. Let's get started. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to get the headset put into place so that we can install the fork. Our headset that we'll be using today is a Chris King sealed cartridge headset. These are some of the best in the industry. This one's pretty old, but it's still running quite smoothly. It is a sealed cartridge bearing system, so I don't have any loose ball bearings or grease to pack into there. These can be serviced by taking out this little snap ring on the inside and removing the bearing cover and injecting grease into them. But we don't really need to do that today. This thing's running great. I am gonna clean up the edges of it since it is gonna press into the frame, and we're gonna go ahead and get started. When we look at this, there's not really a top or bottom cup, but if we want it to read with the lettering right side up, we're gonna keep this one on the top and this one on the bottom. There are some people who install these backwards just for fun. I like to keep them lined up just for aesthetic purposes. And we're gonna try to line this up nice and neat on the head tube so we can get everything set up nice and clean. We're going to begin by just putting a thin layer of grease on the inside of the head tube where the headset cups are gonna press in. This isn't absolutely necessary, but I like to always keep a little thin layer of grease between steel and aluminum parts. It just helps keep corrosion from getting in there and, you know, taking hold. So we're gonna just line that up a little bit. We are going to use our headset press today to press in these cups for this headset. Now, Chris King headsets typically take a special insert, so we're gonna have to do this in a way that's a little bit unorthodox, but we're gonna go very carefully and hopefully not damage our headset cups. So I'm gonna set the first one up top here, and it says King right side up, facing directly out from the front of the bicycle. So we have our lettering lined up, and we're actually going to be pressing down on the outside of these aluminum cups. This is, again, very much not recommended, but we're making do with what we have here today. We're going to set the second one on the bottom, and we're going to back out the screw on the top just until we can get the headset tool to snap into place. Headset cups are nice and aligned, and we're very carefully going to press them into place. The bottom one goes in all the way. Top one's going in quite nicely. And again, since I'm pressing down on the actual aluminum externals of the cup, I'm gonna go very cautiously and kind of just snug that into place. Okay, the next thing we would do here would be to install the crown race of the headset. Now, I've already done that because I wanted to make sure that it was gonna fit the race of this fork, or the crown of the fork, pardon me. The way this is done, this is a little metal race that runs on the inside of the bearing at the bottom. We use this thing called a slide hammer, which goes over the top. It's got a brass fitting on it that protects, and you just slam it into place until the crown race sits nicely on the crown of the fork, like so. It's looking really good there, so we are good to go. The next thing we're gonna do here is we're gonna mock up the fork inside of the head tube of the bike. We wanna make sure that we have the right amount of steer tube sticking out of the top so that we can get the appropriate amount of spacers and our stem on the front end of the bicycle. So this is pretty quick and easy. We're just gonna feed the fork up through the center of the head tube. We're gonna set our upper race into place. There we go. We're gonna set that down into place. Place our plastic. I'm gonna see if I can just run my my cable stop first, and it is clearing the headset, so it's not running into the headset at all. It won't run into the headset at all. This makes things really handy because what I can actually do, if I were to let go of this fork right now, everything could slide out, the fork could hit the ground, and we'd be in all sorts of trouble. But since this has a little clamp on it, we can just clamp this guy down, and that'll grip onto the fork and at least allow us to let go, and the whole fork isn't gonna fall out of place. Next thing we have is, well, we have the stem, but we're also gonna need some spacers. I'm just placing the stem to judge how many spacers we are going to need in order to get a full stack here. And we are gonna have a little bit more compression here, so I'm probably gonna use 2 big spacers and 2 small spacers. But since I wanna have my stem starting kind of at the highest height it'll go, I'm gonna set those spacers onto the stem and then run the stem high. Now this is kind of, I'm an older guy. I have some back injuries. This is a little bit higher than a lot of people would run their stem, but I'm gonna play it like that first, and then if I'm dissatisfied, I can always lower the stem and move spacers up onto the top of it. It looks a little goofy, but it's gonna allow me some adjustment of my stem down the road, which is really nice. So basically what this is telling me is that we can go with our steerer being uncut. That means we're not gonna cut any material off of the top of the steer tube, and we're just gonna leave it where it's at. This is what is called a star nut, or its proper term is actually a star-fangled nut. And what this does is it hammers down into the steer tube of the fork in order to be able to accept a bolt, which will then be the compression bolt that holds everything together from the top of the stem when our headset is assembled. Now, typically speaking, you would install a star nut with the fork off of the bike, and we could do it on the bike here. Let's do it off the bike just to show it correctly. So I'm gonna disassemble what I have here, and I'm gonna drop the fork out so we can get this installed. So we're gonna go fast motion now. Okay, now we have the fork disinstalled from the bike. Once again, we're gonna set up our star-fangled nut setter, and let's do this. I wanna have a hammer handy. This is the setter tool. There is a setting for 1-inch forks and 1 1/8" diameter forks. This is an 1 1/8" diameter fork. So we're gonna set it to the wider side facing down, meaning this portion of the tool is gonna stick out there. We're going to set the star-fangled nut into the tool like so, just about as far as it will go. Now what's gonna happen is this is gonna recess a little bit. We're gonna have a nice place to put the top of the fork, and then we're gonna hammer this thing down into place, and it's preset to a depth. So it'll just go as deep as the tool allows it to go. So once again, we're just gonna take the end of the fork here and set this into place. You can see right here it says 1 1/8. And then we're going to hold the fork by the crown and carefully hammer this thing into place. So here we go. And you can kind of hear it when it stops. You start to hear metal on metal. Tack. That loud metal on metal noise means that we've set this down as far as it will go. We can then unthread it from the star-fangled nut on the inside, and there you have it. The star-fangled nut is installed all the way down into the fork. We're now going to reinstall everything back on the bike. Now, this will fall apart unless we tighten down the stem. To temporarily hold everything in place. The last thing to go on here is our top cap with a 6mm nut installed. We're going to set it into place up top and partially screw it in. Now we don't want to screw it down all the way because we need to now create compression in our headset adjustment. The way we do that is loosen the stem bolt, tighten down the nut on top. We're going to check to see that this spins freely. The King headsets have a little bit of seal drag in them, but we just want it to feel smooth and nice, and we don't want to be able to spin our spacers by hand. That would mean that things are a little too loose. I'm going to tighten down just a tiny bit more for good measure. We want to make sure that everything is lined up nice and neat all the way down the front of the bike, meaning our cable stop and our stem, and then we can tighten down all of the external bolts, and we want to do so on the stem a little bit at a time to even them out, and then we want to tighten down our cable stop once we know it's straight, and we're going to be doing some final adjustments on those later. And there we have it. Our stem is now installed along with our fork. We have smooth play from side to side, and we're ready to set up our handlebar setup.